So the focus of the talk today is around my latest book. It's called Source Dialogues. And it's around the miracle mechanism of manifestation. Well, that miracle mechanism of manifestation is the Star Tetrahedron. And we're going to go through the entire formation of it, how it unfolded. This, of course, is the three-dimensional Star Tetrahedron. It's also interesting that it's one of the symbols on UCM's logo, if you notice. This just happens to be the three-dimensional representation of it. And it's a structure of consciousness and light that we begin to build around us as we begin to refine the two aspects of creation: power as masculine and feminine as love. And so when we bring the divine of true masculine power, which is simply focused attention, just like light. So when you go to the movie, they turn on the projector, and it's simply the attention of focused light. So that's true power. Now, when we bring the divine feminine in, which is imagination and love, that's the film. And so as the bright light of attention and focus, true masculine power, shines through emotion and feeling, it simply then outpictures it and creates it. And so that is then the miracle mechanism of manifestation. Now, the Star Tetrahedron was first cognized from out of the void. So we know that approximately 13.5 billion years ago, there was just the void. And the void, of course, was existing all through no time, no space. And within the void, Source, God, whatever you'd like to call it, was simply imagining and creating with an imagination, unendingly. But there was no manifestation. And it was in that moment of no time, no space, that Source asked itself, what am I? And that moment of what am I, there was an emanation that we call the Big Bang. But it was a sound. And that sound we know from the cosmology of India is the Om, not O-M, but A-U-M. Om. And so the A is the projection of the first wave that goes up. The U comes down into the trough. It's in silence, the the M, and then it comes back up into the Ah. And so that was the sound that was emanated at the Big Bang. It also says in the Bible, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life. So as the Om was sounded, if you can imagine that first impulse, Source emanating, the sound, Om, created a vibration, waveform. And that waveform then traveled through the entire cosmos. But where there is a waveform and it begins to reverberate through the cosmos, as those waves cross and move over each other, it creates energy. And that energy coming together then created mass. And so that is the first triangulation of power, what we might call the Father, emanating sound from out of the void that created this perfect triangulation. And because it is an equal triangle, equilateral, it has then the greatest stability and strength of anything. But then source was still simply vibrating with energy and with mass, but still there was no thing. And that's when the positive polarity cognized that there must be then the feminine polarity, to have the yin, the yang, the light, the dark of creation. And so source then mirrored itself. And as it mirrored itself, then vibration, Om, became love. Source simply loving what it had created. Love then created form. Form created wisdom. And so with love, wisdom, form, action, both the positive polarity, the father, the negative mother of the feminine was created just by mirroring itself. But still a sense of separation. Here's the father, here is the mother, two triangles on top of each other. But over time, they then begin to come together. And as they then begin to come together and fuse into perfect harmony, that was the creation of the Star Tetrahedron, which is the Christ. The Christ is not a person, even though individuals like Jesus and Buddha and Krishna, as well as many other ascended beings, have mastered the Christ. It is simply the mechanism of creation. And when it was created, the upper triangulation was then moving in a clockwise rotation within you and I from left to right. The lower triangulation of divine feminine love was then moving right to left in counter rotation. And as those two movements of the triangulation occurred, it then created in the very center of this triangulation a vortex. And that vortex opened a doorway back into the void. And then from out of the void, source could simply bring forth imagination, feeling, and as it then touched power, the projector at the movie, imagination and love, the facets of this spinning triangulation, a prism of living light, it simply emanated it out as manifestation. And so for the first time, materiality existed. But it still came from source. Now, the other beautiful thing about that, the vortex is a dodecahedron. So when this is spinning, if you look at the interior of the vortex, where all of these lines of force meet in the middle, it then creates the dodecahedron. And as the dodecahedron then has 12 points of light, in the original creation, those 12 points of light began to stream out individual rays of energy, which then became the 12 colors, the 12 sounds on the piano, the white and the black keys. And as those 12 streamed out, it was the very beginning of creation from what we call archangelic energy. There are 12 archangels. And so we know mostly about the four of them: Raphael, Michael, Uriel, Ariel. But there are really 12 archangels. And each of them is on one of those particular colors or rays of energy, that particular sound. And as that streamed through the universe, coming from source, it was in perfection, it was in oneness, it was still in wholeness. It just had been fractaled into individuality, but still emanating from source. And as then more and more star tetrahedrons were created, as those angelic rays began to cognize within them that they could bring together power and love, they could open within themselves a doorway back into void. And so not only was there the one emanation from out of source, there were now 12 archangelic rays. And from each one of them, for eons and literally billions of years, each of us is on one of the fractal rays of one of those archangelic colors and sounds. Still emanating in wholeness and oneness from the divine living light. And so perfection still exists within the divine soul, the divine higher self that you are. That soul, or divine higher self, then wanted to experience materiality. But in the beginning, there was no materiality. There was simply positive and negative, which creates one energy of mass, which is hydrogen. And so hydrogen then filled the universe. But hydrogen began to fall in love with itself. And as hydrogen began to coalesce and move back together, finally coalescing over time into such a outrageous mass of energy, the pressure, the energy ignited it into a nuclear radiance. And for the first time, there was light within the universe. Stars were born. And that was about 700 to 800 years after the Big Bang. Up to then, it was still darkness upon the waters. And so as stars, which are also star tetrahedrons, everything is consciousness. As Scout said, there's only consciousness. The table is conscious, the floor is conscious, earth is conscious. It's simply the oneness of the divine separating itself and finally coalescing into form that has created materiality. But it's God, it's source. That's why every human being is God, is source. All creation is but one, with many different fractal colors and sounds that has created its uniqueness. But within stars, which are also the solar logos, the solar being that was the consciousness that began to attract and gather that hydrogen to it, that ignited itself into a star, still had at the very center of that star a black hole. Back into the void, back into source. And so source in the consciousness, connecting all together as one, was still streaming from inside out of all creation. Over time, as the stars continued to grow and to fold and to emanate light, after 3 or 4 billion years, they burned themselves out. But what happened next is that they began to collapse upon themselves with such heat and such pressure and such nuclear radiance that the hydrogen began to be squeezed together. And so when you take 2 hydrogens and squeeze them together, it becomes helium. Squeeze 2 helium, it becomes carbon. And so all the mineral elements within the whole universe were created through stars. when they collapsed upon themselves. But then they exploded. And all that mineral substance was then sent out into time, space. All the minerals that you could name that exist on Earth came from stars. And so all the calcium and the iron and the water and the magnesium in your body, stardust. You are walking stardust. This is stardust. This is stardust. And then, as that energy was then moving, that materiality through the cosmos, it was time for the second go-around of star formation, which is what our particular sun is. And so, again, a consciousness, a great being of light, still emanating from source oneness, began to gather to it once again, not only hydrogen and helium to ignite itself into a star, but it also began to attract around it the mineral kingdom, not by happenstance, but in a very conscious formation, because the energy field of our particular sun, which we call the sun's light wave and its particular emanation, goes out way past Pluto. Now, that's a big aura. And so all of the planets within this total solar system are still held within the energetic energy field of our particular sun. And as the sun then began to create its chakra system, again, not by simply moving upon the materiality, but calling forth spiritual entities and beings who could then gather at the same time in co-creation with our sun. And thus we have Gaia, the conscious mother, who ensouls planet Earth as an intelligence, a wisdom that is unfolding in co-creative union with the solar logos. Just as your body has been developing your chakra system, the solar logos, our sun, has been developing its chakra system. And we think it's monstrous and we think it's large, but our sun is less than a mote of dust in the entire size of the cosmos. And so things are so outrageously large. And then we, in our limited perception, we think, well, how could that be, that the sun is an intelligent being, that Gaia Earth is evolving? But it's all part of a wave of evolution that still is progressing from the spiritual light that exists within the Star Tetrahedron, within Mother Earth, within the sun, within every atom within creation. Have you ever seen pictures of an electron, an atom? There's, again, the core, neutron, proton. But then the electron moves at light speed so fast around, it gives it the idea of form. But we know that an atom is 99.999999% space. You are just hollow. But the electron moves so rapidly with our perception, we then believe it has physical form. Until a master like Jesus, who has mastered the Christ field, comes along and changes it and heals it and makes it different, allows himself to be destroyed and brings a new body forth. It's just part of evolution. And there just happen to be individuals, Krishna, Jesus, probably Buddhas, others, who have been able to master the Christ field and open the doorway within them. And from out of it, source emanates into this dimension. It's why Jesus said, I am the doorway. He didn't mean the man Jesus. The I am within him had opened the doorway back into source. And so source, as he said, the Father within me does the work. It is source that he was able then to see, feel, summon into this dimension, touching the facets of the spinning star, which is a crystalline prism, which is where the word Christ really comes from. It's a crystalline prism of living light. Now, as Mother Earth and materiality was then formed, there were still light beings moving through the cosmos upon this pure ray of archangelic energy, which are you and I. And because we were moving on that ray of purity, there was no time, there was really no space, there was just being. And after billions of years, we kind of begin to cognize this is boring. I know what's going to happen tomorrow. I know what's going to happen the next day. I know what's going to happen the next day. There's no time. There's no space. I've been here before. Boring. And so probably from boredom, we, along with greater angelics, decided we would then formulate a physical dimension of reality, learn how to coalesce it into form along with the great energy of Mother Gaia in co-creation. And then once it was formed, we, along with other angelics and other beings, then began to move upon the minerals within the sea. And like architects, we then planned to create the first amoebas. Now, the other very interesting thing about the Star Tetrahedron, as it turns and spirals upwards, it's DNA. So if you take the 4 nucleotides, guanine, cytosine, thymine, adenine, and you begin to spin them rapidly, one going this way, the lower triangulation going this way, and with spirit, with consciousness, formulating how do those particular nucleotides come together, it then creates protein structures. And so it is then the Star Tetrahedron that creates DNA. And so we then were able to cognize the beginning of life forms, amoebas. And then with Mother Earth, Gaia, with the sun as a co-participant, with light rays which are full of life and light, moving upon the amoebas, they then begin to evolve. As they begin to evolve, 3 amoebas became something completely different. And so you and I are a great big bundle of walking amoebas. Truth. We've just evolved those amoebas to do very specific functions and things. But once again, it's simply the mineral kingdom that has been brought together by consciousness to create a form. And then over time, as we continue to develop and evolve humanity with, again, other beings, again, still within perfection within our higher self, the soul, the great being that will never be but perfection you are, we then begin to cognize ways to finally begin to get inside the experiment. And so about 200,000 years ago, there was the development of a man-woman that had a right brain and a left brain. And so now spirit could begin to, through the crown chakra, begin to enter into the experiment. No longer outside, moving upon it, trying to develop it, like chemists, but for the first time, souls, beings of light, as we know it on this planet, began to enter into the experiment. And so incarnation, the soul simply separating itself from its great and divine oneness, simply took a piece of itself, dropped it down into time, space, and we began to incarnate. And then from inside the experiment, we were now conscious. Rudimentary consciousness, mind you. But then we begin to learn through trial and error, dancing with power, dancing with love, dancing with emotions, using power as, first of all, manipulation and control and need and want and desire. The divine feminine as emotionality, giving over oneself constantly, denying oneself, not really loving oneself. But as these souls began to move both through the masculine form and the feminine form, we began to learn all about the divine masculine, the divine feminine, the fallen masculine, the fallen feminine, until we reached a place of now spiritual awakening. We're beginning to refine power. Power as we see it in the world is still mostly based upon manipulation, control, wanting, desiring, needing. As Scout said, there's nothing wrong with it. It's simply part of evolution, seeking to learn if I hurt or harm or destroy something in one incarnation, I'll come back and be hurt, harmed, or destroyed. And then with emotion, if I take someone's power away and they feel powerless, I'll come back next incarnation. I won't love myself. I'll find a father that will deny me and manipulate me, and I'll be powerless. And then my husband will create me to be powerless. But all just part of a learning program. As I see it, no error, no mistakes, nothing's ever been wrong. It's simply consciousness, the divine and sacred that you are, seeking to learn all there is to know about a material world that is very dense and sticky. And why? The great why, I think, is because we are, the Scout said, at the place of a next evolutionary jump. We can begin to refine within us divine masculine power through meditation, through our spiritual work, through many different ways in which we understand how power works. We begin to refine the mind into a quiet instrument. It no longer talks, it no longer dialogues. It's simply a quiet, attentive something. But it's that something that you can then focus the light of the great being you are, the light of the soul. And as you then learn about love, how can I begin to find the emotion that I felt that is still stuck in the tissues of my body that creates my suffering, my disease? Because all suffering disease is simply emotionally based. Emotion wasn't moving in a flow of living water, and so it got stuck. But the emotion is the gift. If you dive into the emotion and feel it, don't dislike it or judge it, you can begin to slip through it and find the part of yourself that wasn't loved from, yes, some mother, father, circumstances, but they were simply giving you back from previous lifetimes your karma. So that as you then had that emotion, that loneliness, that sadness, you could begin to learn how to love yourself. You could find that divine child within that was born in perfection, like a jewel, covered over with the mud and the ignorance of humanity, the world, the programs. Again, I see it as no possible error, simply information dancing to understand and know about itself. But as we dive through the emotion and then find the part of ourselves that was hurt or harmed or unloved, and then we begin to so powerfully love that child, the emotion like smoke disappears. And we're no longer projecting it out and saying, well, that person makes me angry or this person makes me sad. Because the aura is simply still a giant motion picture making machine. Most of us don't quite know how we're getting what we get, but that's our spiritual path. We begin to be conscious that if I put out negative energy, I will receive it back. And again, as Scout said, once we then find the beam of light and we're living in love, Because we're emanating love, that's the world that we magnetize back to us. Whatever you're meeting in the world, it's simply an outpicturing of something within you. Now, let's codify that for a minute. If you see it in the world, but you don't judge it or criticize or dislike it, it's not yours. You're simply observing it. That person's angry, this person is bitter, that person is hateful. But if you judge it or criticize or dislike it, there has to be a vibration within you that is matching that vibration out there. You magnetize it to you. And it can be subtle within you. It can be something quietly hidden within your liver. I'm still quietly pissed off at Dad. Or I'm quietly pissed at Mom because she didn't give me that or love me. But again, that's your gift as I see it, because if you then, as the divine being you are, the sacred soul, that through your meditation practice, as Scout says, you're bringing it down and you're beginning to bring it into the body and you're beginning to calm it and it's changing your cellular structure, you simply dive into the liver, you feel the anger, the pissed off coming up. You settle into it without judgment, without criticism nor dislike, and you find that part of you in childhood that was denied. And as you then love that childlike part of you, that from 0 to 7 didn't have thinking mind, it was simply a feeler. And so everything happened to it. The child believes that must be me. But as Scout also said, you chose your parents to give you the gift of the emotion. And as you dive into it and learn to love yourself unconditionally, you look out in the world and you realize that everyone's in pain or suffering or hatred or loneliness or fear or what's going on in the Middle East. They're just lost and lonely. They're lost children. And as Scout said so beautifully, you simply learn how to open your heart and emanate the light and the love. And it will change the situation, not because you're trying to change the situation. The vibration of living light coming from you is stimulating what is the truth within them. They are God, they are source just as much as this table is. But if you emanate the living light, it goes through their darkness, their sense of their self-separation, and it touches that one cell of wisdom truth within them. And it begins to vibrate them. And over time, when they decide, they can begin to wake up. Or they can shoot and kill themselves and come back and try it again. I think I probably hewed, hacked, and slayed with the best. As we probably all have. But the word karma simply means that which you have not yet loved yourself for. When you love yourself unconditionally and all the emotion and sadness and find the magical child and wake it up into full life, it is the Christ child that begins to live in and through you, the Immaculate Conception. You then live in love and emanate love. And so when Jesus saw someone who was suffering, he didn't try and change them. He didn't try and heal them. He didn't try and make them different. He simply could see inside of them the truth of what is really there. And from the living light that emanated from his being, it simply moved in and through and so powerfully acknowledged the oneness of source that is also within them, they could no longer hold their perceptions of limitation. Not trying to change, not trying to heal, but simply loving so profoundly, they had to wake up. But then he said, go forth and sin no more. Because if you do, you get more of this gunk around you. And it can be gunky. So as I see it, we're at the place right now on the planet where we can begin as spiritual beings who are at the very apex, not because we're better than anyone else. The souls who are in first grade, if you're in graduate school, you don't go down to the fence and go, na 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 na, first graders. You give them the tools that they need to begin to grow, because they're simply souls who want to be in that place, want to be in that time, because it's what they need. And the love and the light that's emanating from you, just like sunlight, it begins to seed them. So my feeling is, as we're at this point in evolution, that we can begin to hone and refine the mind into an instrument of perfect silence and focus, the light of the soul. As we bring ourselves more and more into the place of unconditional love within, again, not trying to change things out there, but as Scout says, you simply draw it to you to reflect off, what do I dislike there? There must be a peace here. And then as it is then brought back into love here, you then stand in equalness and equanimity with all life. And as that begins to happen, you then begin to hone and refine, almost unconsciously at first, the beginnings of the Star Tetrahedron, the Christ matrix. And you begin to see and feel in your meditation, there is this triangulation of energy that is moving left to right. And the lower triangulation is moving right to left. And as you're sitting quietly, simply focusing the mind, not trying, but simply seeing and feeling the movement, you begin to unseat it with more vibration of love. It begins to create more of a crystalline structure of consciousness and light around you. And over time, you begin to feel this doorway opening. In India, they call it the jewel in the lotus. Don't know if you've heard that term. But the jewel in the lotus is the dodecahedron. And as it opens back into the void, then source emanates from inside out. And then you may truly say, God, I am. And this is why the man Jesus said, I am the way, I am the life, I am the one. Not because the man, but because he'd opened the doorway. And what is I am? If we kind of convult it a bit, or convult it, what's that word? Convolute. As we convolute it a bit, could it be the Om? I am. And so we then, as we open the doorway, we then create the Christ matrix around us. And for me, this is the next stage of evolution on the planet. And as Scout said, it's happening pretty rapidly. But as the light is emanating so outrageously now, it's illuminating the darkness. And we have a choice. We can dislike it and judge it and hate what's going on, which gives it more energy. Or as spiritual luminaries, by so loving ourselves, we can simply become the living light. Just as Scout said, you can become the living Christ. Not a person, but a matrix of living light around you that opens a doorway back into source oneness. And from inside out, you then expand evolution. Something that's never happened probably in too many places in the cosmos. Materiality finally becoming a receptacle for a living God within it, that from inside out can create new things, new beginnings, new opportunities that have never been seen in the cosmos. I think that's what Earth is. And I think we are at that cusp right now. It doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow, but each of us has the choice, as we have here, to really begin our deep spiritual awakening. When I began my awakening 40 years ago, so I just named myself, I started meditating twice a day. And I started out 20 minutes twice a day, and as I continued to meditate and go to retreats for 3-4 months at a time, I began to increase my meditation until now it's an hour twice a day. And I can probably count on my fingers and toes the days I've missed in those 40 years. I would let nothing get in the way of my meditation. It's the tone, it's the sound, it's the energy that sets me forth on the day. And more importantly, it's taught me how to so refine my mind that it's a silent instrument. Doesn't talk, doesn't dialogue, it doesn't think, it simply sits quietly. And as truth from the heart arises forth, feeling, imagination, one then brings light to that. It's not that I'm in this place of perfection yet. I still hone and refine myself every day. I found recently that I was kind of sitting outside of the Star Tetrahedron, and I was kind of as consciousness trying to watch and make it spin. And that was the beginning of it. And from my heart, I began to believe, well, maybe I can breathe from the back of my heart and breathe sort through. And so there was somewhat of a feeling of an opening. And over time, as the Star Tetrahedron continued to hone and refine itself, I soon found myself sitting at the doorway in the place of pure silence. As you sit in the place of pure silence, you then have a choice. What will you summon from Source? And so I simply summon golden liquid light. And I allow golden liquid light to touch the facets of the spinning star and magnify it to whatever amount I can. They say that Jesus had an aura of about 12 miles. I'm not even close. If I can fill my room, I've got a good day. But I keep practicing. So that's the essence of Source Dialogues. It's the information I received about my soul in its relationship to the Christ, that I was given the kind of charge to go forth and let people know that Christ is not a person, it's not a consciousness. It's a field of energy, just like a nuclear field. And once that nuclear field is honed and refined, then Source, God, what you came from and who you are, it then emanates in full knowing and consciousness from you, and then you may truly say, God, I am, just as Jesus did. So, questions about this whole dissertation? This show and tell?
I have a question that I'll ask in private.
Okay. Private questions are accepted.
As I was listening to you earlier, and you talked about the power of influencing energy, and that other people could kind of draw from your energy, I thought, do we have control of that, or do we just say, I'm going to make myself healthy, good, whatever good is, and then as people take my energy, they just take it, or do you, I always want to direct it.
Right.
I think, that's a good guy over there, I hope he has some energy, I'll send him a little energy,
Yeah, that's lovely. Yes, it's lovely. Yeah, it's like the sun. If someone is standing in the cold and you bring them out in the sun, they go, wow, this feels pretty good. And so that's what the Star Tetrahedron is what Scout was saying from the way that he brings the living light within him. It's the way many of us do our work. We know that it's from the heart that the living light emanates. I just would encourage you in the understanding that you're not trying to change them, because that's manipulation and control. I'm giving them the gift of the living light. If they want to spat on it, that's fine. If they don't like it, it's fine. But I know it reached the core within them of what they are too, which is Source, and it's happening. Now, once again, whatever you're meeting in life, again, you've attracted it to you to give you some information about yourself. And if you, again, find a small spot of anger inside, it's just small. You may bring forth a big thing of anger to stimulate it within you. It doesn't mean what you see out there that makes you outrageously angry is who you are. It means there could be a spot. Or if something that you see just makes you cry and you're just bereaved, Doesn't mean you are that. It means there's still a spot where the childlike part of you doesn't feel loved by the Divine Mother. So we use everything that we meet as simply a reflection of, who am I? Who am I? Other thoughts or questions? Yes?
So when you say, did you say liquid light? You did, right? Liquid light?
Liquid light?
So are you including the vibration and frequency of love in that term of liquid light? Because
Within
you
yourself?
talked about the feminine energy, which we know is the love energy, but to me the light and love are equal. My understanding of light and love are equal.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But really, they're polar opposites. There's light, which illuminates things, and then there's love, which feels things. And so that's the two polarities of creation, the Father of light, the Mother of love. But if you just have the Mother, which is then just no light, it's filled with possibilities, but there's no form. And so it's light shining upon love that creates form. Matter, mass, expression. But if you just have light and no love, it could blind you. If you go stand in front of a totally brilliant white light, it's going to blind you. But light and love creates gold. And so that's why so many spiritual people use white light, but it creates this polar opposite of darkness. Golden light, it's the mystical marriage of light and dark, mother and father. It's living sunlight. And so when there's gold within our meditation, we are illuminating from inside out. Now, some people, which again, there's nothing wrong with it, they want to put protection around them. But if you're putting protection around you, you're simply holding at bay something that you're attracting to you. And over time, it's going to get so big, when it finally breaks through, that's when there's a wailing and a gnashing of teeth. Because whatever you are attracting to you that you dislike or judge or criticize, there has to be a spot, a subtlety of it within your auras, within your body. Whereas when we're emanating golden sunlight and peace, it then feels that which is coming to us and so powerfully loves it, it then simply slipstreams around us, or it changes it before it gets to us. Again, we're not trying to change it. We're not trying to protect ourselves. We just are the sun. It's just like if you cast something, I don't care what size it is, at the sun, the physical sun, won't get there. The sun will simply bring it back into oneness with itself. And so that's, again, what we do is we continue to hone, refine the Star Tetrahedron, the Christ within us. But it begins through finding that childlike part of you, which is the Christ child, the Immaculate Conception. And as your power and love reaches down within those lower chakras and begins to release the emotion, the loneliness, the fear, the sadness, the hatred, the dislike, which are simply reflections of what happened to the child, and bring love within, self-love is established. And because the light of the mind is now focusing through love, you then become the emanation of the living light. Anything else before we? Sure.
Could you say just a little bit about, as we release the unknown emotions that we held, and then our frequency starts to come, the death-eating chili that can happen physically?
Sure. As we go through a real awakening very dynamically with a deep spiritual practice, the frequency of the body can change so rapidly that there can be some temporary or some dynamic pain and suffering that happens within the physical body. I think we probably all experience that, particularly as healers' curls. When we work with people, we see that we work on them, and the next day they're feeling kind of funky. It's just, yeah, we're just changing our frequency, and as we change it, then things can come up on a physical level, and it can be challenging. There's been a couple of times in my life where I was overboard with the light and literally had radiation skin burns on my body from inside out. So I slowed down just a bit. Anything else, my friends, as we close today?
Did you bring books?
I did bring books. They're $25 or I'll arm wrestle. Yeah, arm wrestle.
A lot of the women are going,
And of course, you can always get a hold of me via my email or my website. It's a tricky website, GarySpringfield.com. And just get a hold of me by email, and I'd be happy to send you a book. Please.
I just noticed this new thing, and maybe you can describe it, but I've recently learned how to do this thing where if someone's presenting in front of me something quite disturbing,
Yes?
for whatever reason, I can just be really still and just kind of nod, and I don't match it, I don't involve in it, but I don't rebel against it, I just,
Mm-hmm.
and it just sort of dissipates.
Right. Then it's not yours. Bravo. You see, that's healing. You simply love them for what they are and what they're doing.
Yeah.
But if there isn't that moment, I'll tell you a funny story. I had a lot of mother issues. My mother really didn't like me. So I worked through a lot of it. And one day I was coming back from Sedona. I'd done a workshop and I was feeling pretty stellar. I was driving down the freeway coming home to Carmel. And as I was driving along, this girl pulled up beside me, blonde hair blowing in the breeze and music playing loudly, and it was a convertible Mustang. And she wanted to get over my lane, and she started honking. And I looked over to her and I went, and I said to myself, oh, she got me. She got me. It took that kind of out of the blue something to get my mother issue at another level up and out. I created her. I mean, what a great creation. But I've created many of those wonderful things just like you have. But I now am very clear within myself, mind you, that whatever I'm meeting out there that I judge, criticize, dislike, or bothers me, it has to be here. And I've always done one thing. I've brought the spiritual light in, and I've gone down, and I found that little boy that was programmed in ignorance, that he chose as his soul from mother, father, culture, society. As I felt the emotion, sometimes outrageous hatred and anger and loneliness and worthlessness to the core, which I thought I would never get through, and kept digging it up and feeling him and loving him, just like smoke. It would just begin to disappear. And over time, I felt this magic awakening within me. And over time, I knew that I had awakened the Christ child within me. And over time, as I've been doing the Star Tetrahedron work, I know it's growing within and through me, but I'm still, again, very focused upon honing and refining. So that's the story of the Star Tetrahedron, the miracle mechanism of manifestation. It's the atom, it's the sun, it's around you, it just hasn't been cognized yet. It's Mother Earth, it's all creation. It's the Christ, the crystalline prism of living light. And when it spins, the vortex in the very middle of the heart chakra opens, and you literally feel source as the breath of life emanating from inside out. As Scout says, it emanates front and back and sides and up and down and all around. And you know, more and more each day, I can be the living light. It's interesting, it's also the Jewish star, which happens to be our man Jesus. Know that source is the open doorway within. And so as it emanates from inside out, this is the fullness of source I am. Doesn't mean I won't read a book or see a wonderful YouTube video or hear information from other teachers. But at the same time, I know that they're simply also having the God within them, that's the God within me, emanating from inside out. The thing about looking, it sometimes becomes hide and seek. Oh, I'm looking for God. So let's close the eyes and just feel the body relaxing. Just relaxing and letting go. And I invite you to bring your attention to the breath. Whenever we're focused upon breath, the mind cannot be thinking. So let's be aware of the breath with a very slow, deep inhalation. Maybe feeling the air moving across the nostrils and filling the lungs. Observing the gentle exhale. Learning to focus the mind simply upon breath. Breathing in, breathing out, and relaxing. Slowly and gently bring your attention between the eyebrows and imagine, image in, you could draw a line straight back. The approximate center point of the head, ignite the light. I imagine the light of the soul. Imagination is the key to spirituality. What I imagine becomes real. Within the center point of the mind, brain, light increasing. I gently focus the light to the heart chakra at the sternum. I begin to imagine the Star Tetrahedron above, below, and all around. The upper triangulation of divine power is turning left to right. Left shoulder to right shoulder. The upper triangulation turns. The lower triangulation of divine love beneath is turning right to left, counterclockwise. Don't let the mind get lost in making it turn this way or that. Simply know and feel. Star tetrahedron above, beneath, and all around. And as the triangulations are turning, It's opening a sacred vortex within the center of the heart chakra. A doorway back into the void. The eternal I am of Source. And from the open doorway, you are breathing Source into this dimension. Feel your in-breath summoning Source from the open doorway. Gentle exhale, sparkling, effervescent light through every cell and tissue out into the world. I am the light. Upper triangulation turning. Lower triangulation turning. Sacred vortex within the heart opening into the void. God, I am, arising forth from the open doorway, bringing life and light into this dimension. I am the living light. I am. And with each breath, summoning Source from the open doorway. Out breath, sparkling, effervescent liquid light through the body out into the world. The spinal column is a golden tube of living light deep into the earth, to the heavens above, and the Star Tetrahedron turns. And the open vortex within the heart summons Source. And I breathe. Hold the mind steady upon the image of the Star Tetrahedron. The open doorway within the heart. I am the light. And then very easily now, feeling peaceful and quiet, heart open to Source, God I am, light streaming into this dimension. You can feel yourself slowly coming back more and more into the moment. And when it's comfortable, to open the eyes.